started. Good morning. Today we start to look at chapter 10 of the book of Acts, first 23 verses. And this continues talking about Peter, and he's in Joppa. He had gone there and had raised Tabitha, Dorcas, from the dead yesterday, and was staying with this Simon the tanner, a person of not ill repute, but a person who was unclean by Jewish standards. And this starts out in Caesarea. There was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort. So he was not a Jewish person, and he was a person. He was a ranking officer. He was like a captain or a major or whatever, a centurion, ruling over at least 100 men that way, and it says he was a devout man who feared God and all of his household. He donated to the workings of the church and prayed, it says, constantly to God, but really hadn't fully become into the Jewish community. And then it says one afternoon about 3 o'clock, he had a vision. And so 3 o'clock in the afternoon is their lunchtime. And an awful lot of people here, at 3 o'clock, you have lunch. We eat at noon and lunch at 3, and we eat again at 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock, or depending on how busy we are, maybe 8 o'clock at night. But so about lunchtime, it says he had an angel. He clearly saw an angel of God coming, saying to him, Cornelius, called him by name. And his response, of course, is he stared at him in terror, and said, "What is it, Lord?" And I can understand. All of a sudden, this heavenly being is there, and the terror that would be there. And the angel responds, "Your prayers and your alms have ascended to a memorial to God." So God has heard your prayers. God has heard your plea. God knows what's on your mind. And the angel says to him, "Now send to Joppa for a certain Simon who is called Peter, who is staying with Simon a tanner." So very specific, that this Simon Peter is staying with Simon the tanner. Very definite who he's supposed to go and find. And so when he would get to Joppa or however, it shouldn't be too hard to find this man or these men that he's looking for. So the angel left, and Cornelius calls two of his slaves and a trusted devout servant and to send to Joppa. And he tells them the story of what the angel had said to him, and they go. And he says, after telling them everything, he sent them to Joppa. At noon the next day, and again, this is the time to eat, their journey was approaching the city. Peter went up on the roof to pray. Being hungry, he asked for something to eat, but in the meantime, he fell into this trance. And this is an important part of who Peter becomes and of how our Christian traditions come about as well, how we, deviate from the Jews, because this curtain, a tablecloth, comes down, and it says, it's filled with all kinds of four-footed creatures and reptiles and birds, things that a good Jewish person knew that they weren't supposed to eat. And so Peter hears this voice. He says, "Peter, get up, kill and eat." And Peter, no way, he says, "I've never eaten anything profane in my life. I've never eaten any forbidden food." And 3 times this happens. And when something happens 3 times, it's got a meaning. You pay attention a little bit more. And the voice comes from God. What God has made clean, you must not call it profane. And so Peter understands then, thinking more about it later, not immediate understanding, but Peter thinks more about this vision from God. But as he is still puzzled, these men from Joppa come and call for him. And he goes downstairs and he hears what they have to say. Because the angel, it says the Spirit came to him and says, get up, go downstairs, and go with no hesitation. Go with these men. And so Peter comes down and says, I'm the one you're looking for. What's the reason you came? And they tell him the story of Cornelius. And it says Peter invites them in and gives them lodging. So, this is at noon, So they spend the rest of the day there with Peter and, lodge with, so think about this. Peter is staying with Simon the tanner. But he invites these three men in and they lodge there again as well. And it's just, in some ways it seems like, taking a little bit of advantage of the host. But yet, God worked in such direct ways and speaking and everything that way and telling the disciples what to do and leading and showing them so many different things that way. So they lodged, they spent the rest of the day there talking, visiting, doing whatever. And then the next morning they get up and set back on their way then to Cornelius's house in Caesarea. And Caesarea, if you remember, just, if we read about Philip, and that Caesarea is the home of Philip as well. But it's a place where Christianity, as we know it, as we call it today, is spreading. And it's impacting people that, you would normally not think that they're going to be impacted, So for God to reach out to Cornelius, this foreigner, and invite him, that way. And for God at the same point in time showing Peter that, it's okay to eat pork. It's okay to eat some of these other things that, you've always thought are taboo. You can't eat that stuff. But it's just another example to me of how God can change a person. Not only a person, but an entire country, the whole world. And when we listen to God, and these early apostles and these people were very, very good at listening to God. Too bad that we can't all listen quite as well today. And I'm not talking about just you and me, but all people in general, to hear God's word and to obey.